The forces that hollowed out small-town America don't want you to see this video because these 9 South Carolina towns are selling entire homes for less than the price of a new car, some under $80,000, and once you understand exactly why, you might just see the deal of a lifetime hiding in plain sight. See, there's a version of the American small town nobody puts in the tourism ad. Not the thriving Main Street with the coffee shop and the string lights. The other one, the town that had one big industry, watched it leave, and never fully recovered. That's not a story about bad places or bad people. It's a story about economics, mills that moved overseas, a crop that collapsed, an interstate that got built in the wrong spot. And every one of those stories left behind something specific, solid brick homes in real communities that now cost a fraction of what they should. I drove all over the state to find them, and what I learned changed how I see a cheap house entirely. There's a town the interstate literally erased, where a house sells for $76,000. There's a mill town that went completely dead when the jobs left, and is now betting its whole comeback on a river. There's a place that was once home to the single largest textile plant on the planet, and there's a tobacco capital where a full home still goes for under $100 grand. If you've ever wondered why some towns are so cheap, and whether that's a warning or an opportunity, this video is for you. So hit that subscribe button now, because we're counting all 9 of these down, and you do not want to miss number 1. Let's count it down. Number 9, Bamberg, South Carolina. When I first drove into Bamberg, in the flat farm country of the low country interior, I saw exactly what 100 years of agricultural history looks like when the farming fades. Here's the wildcard fact, and the real reason it's cheap. Bamberg County was built on cotton, producing tens of thousands of bales a year, until the boll weevil arrived in the 1920s and gutted the crop almost overnight, sending production crashing by nearly 90%. The town leaned on farming and later on jobs at the nearby Savannah River nuclear site, but as machines replaced field hands and that plant downsized, the paychecks slowly dried up. Today, the median home in the county sits right around $116,000 with some of the lowest property taxes in the state. That's the honest trade-off. You get a solid, affordable home in a quiet, close-knit rural community, but you also get real distance from big city jobs and services. So this is a town for a remote worker, a retiree, or anyone who genuinely wants a slower, simpler pace. And it's worth saying plainly, the people here are proud of Bamberg, and the county is actively working to draw new investment and industry back in. You're buying at the bottom of a long, slow story, not the end of it. There's farmland, fishing, and a genuine sense of community for anyone willing to trade convenience for calm. Cheap house, deep roots, and a whole lot of quiet. Number 8, Bishopville, South Carolina. When I first drove into Bishopville, the seat of tiny Lee County, I found one of the most charmingly eccentric small towns in the entire state. Here's the wildcard fact. This is cotton country that never quite replaced cotton. The town is home to the South Carolina Cotton Museum and, no joke, the famous Button King Museum, where a local man covered his car, his suits, and nearly everything he owned in thousands of buttons. It's quirky, it's proud, and it's genuinely cheap, because when the agricultural economy that built this place thinned out, the prices came down and mostly stayed there. Homes here regularly sell well under $100,000. The honest reason is the same one you'll hear all over this list. The jobs that once filled these towns left, and the housing never got bid back up. For a buyer, that's either a red flag or a green light, depending entirely on what you need. If you want a paid-off house, a topiary garden, a slower life, and a genuine small-town character you can't manufacture, Bishopville quietly delivers. And there's a surprising amount of soul packed into this little place, the world-famous Pearl Friar Topiary Garden, the local legend of the lizard man that put the town on the map, and a main street that's seen hard decades but refuses to give up. The trade-off is the same as everywhere on this list. You're a real drive from a big hospital or a major employer, so bring your own income or your retirement check. But for the price of a used car, you get a whole home in a town with more personality than places 10 times its size. Odd, affordable, and completely itself. Number 7, Darlington, South Carolina. When I first drove into Darlington, up in the PD region, I could hear the echo of engines before I ever saw the track. Here's the wildcard fact. Darlington is a NASCAR town, home to the legendary Darlington Raceway, nicknamed the Lady in Black and Too Tough to Tame, one of the oldest and most storied speedways in all of stock car racing. But the everyday economy here was built on textiles and tobacco, and as both of those industries faded across the second half of the last century, Darlington's home prices settled far below the state average, with a typical home running right around $158,000. That's the pattern again. Proud heritage, faded industry, affordable housing. And here's the upside that makes Darlington interesting. It's close to the growing city of Florence and its hospitals and jobs, so you're not truly isolated. And twice a year, the whole racing world descends on this little town and lights it up. For a buyer who wants cheap, characterful, and connected, Darlington hits a genuine sweet spot. That proximity to Florence is the quiet key. You get a real regional hospital, shopping, and an interstate within a short drive, which is exactly what so many of the deepest discount towns on this list can't offer. So Darlington gives you the low price without the total isolation, plus a downtown that's slowly finding new life and a raceway that pumps energy and money into town every spring and fall. For someone who wants a bargain that still keeps them plugged into the modern world, it's one of the safer bets in the PD. Racing history, real affordability, and a big city just up the road. Number 6. Mullins, South Carolina. When I first drove into Mullins, deeper into the PD, I found a town that still proudly wears a crown it earned a century ago. Here's the wildcard fact. Mullins calls itself the tobacco capital of the world, and it means it. This town literally grew up around the tobacco auction warehouses, with the whole rhythm of local life once following the tobacco season. There's still a South Carolina tobacco museum right downtown, but that's also exactly the reason it's so cheap now. As tobacco farming collapsed across the PD, crushed by overproduction, falling prices, and the federal buyout that finally ended the old quota system, the economic engine that built Mullins simply switched off. Today, the median home here runs around $90,000, with rents near $800 a month and some of the lowest property taxes in the state. That's the teaser I promised you, a tobacco capital where a full home goes for under $100,000. For someone who wants genuine history and rock-bottom costs and who doesn't mind a quiet rural setting, Mullins is a remarkable value. And it's not a ghost town. It's a real functioning community with schools, churches, and a downtown that's leaning into its heritage, drawing visitors to that tobacco museum and the historic buildings around it. You're also within reach of Florence and a little further, the beaches of the Grand Strand, so the isolation is real but not total. If you bring your own income, a home for $90,000 in a town, this proud is a genuinely rare find. A proud town at a humble price. If you're learning things about South Carolina you never expected, do me a favor and hit that like button. It genuinely helps this video reach more people just like you. Number 5. Andrews, South Carolina. When I first drove into Andrews, sitting inland in Georgetown County away from the famous coast, I saw the aftermath of a story that's played out in 1,000 American towns. Here's the wildcard fact and the reason for the price. Andrews was a working manufacturing town, but as the plants that anchored this whole stretch of the Lowcountry closed down over the years, the jobs went with them, and the local economy took a hard hit that it's still climbing back from. What that left behind is housing you can buy for a genuine song. This is one of the most affordable markets in the entire region. Now, I'll be straight with you, the way this channel always is. Fewer local jobs means this is a town that works best for a retiree on a fixed income, a remote worker, or someone commuting toward Georgetown or Myrtle Beach, both within driving range. But if you can bring your own income to it, Andrews hands you a whole lot of house and a whole lot of quiet for very little money. And the location is quietly its biggest asset. You're roughly halfway between historic Georgetown on the coast and the whole Myrtle Beach economy, so a job, a hospital, or a beach day is never more than a manageable drive. The town itself has good bones and cheap land. You're buying low in a place that's been down but is far from out. For a patient buyer with a remote job or a pension, that combination, dirt cheap housing within striking distance of the coast, is hard to find anywhere else in the state. Cheap by circumstance, and close enough to the coast to matter. Number 4. Chester, South Carolina. When I first drove into Chester, in the rolling Piedmont hills between the Broad and Catawba rivers, I saw a handsome old town with beautiful bones and a quiet that tells its own story. Here's the wildcard fact. Chester was a textile town, anchored for generations by mills like Springs, and like nearly every Piedmont mill town, when the American textile industry collapsed and moved overseas, Chester lost its biggest employer and never fully replaced it. The county had, in its own words, little diversification to fall back on, so the homes stayed cheap. You can find solid houses and buildable lots here for prices that would be unthinkable an hour north. And that hour north is exactly the plot twist. Chester sits on the far outer edge of the exploding Charlotte region. Rock Hill and Fort Mill, Two of the fastest growing towns in the country are only about 30 to 45 minutes away. That means Chester's cheap today, but it's sitting directly in the path of a growth wave rolling south. Think about how this usually plays out. When a booming metro runs out of affordable land, the growth doesn't stop. It jumps to the next cheap town down the highway, and the prices follow. Chester has a genuinely beautiful historic downtown, a walkable core, and solid old homes just waiting for that wave to arrive. Of all the towns on this list, Chester may have the clearest path from bargain to boomtown, simply because of where it sits on the map. Historic bones, bargain prices, and a booming metro creeping steadily closer. Number 3. Lancaster, South Carolina. This is the one where the locals will tell you not to count them out. When I first drove into Lancaster, I stood downtown surrounded by murals, galleries, and public art, and I never would have guessed the weight of what this town lost. Here's the wildcard fact. Lancaster was once home to what was billed as the single largest textile plant in the entire world, the enormous Springs operation, and when that industry unwound, it knocked the economic legs out from under the whole town. That's the teaser I promised you, the place that once held the biggest textile plant on the planet, and it's a huge part of why the town itself stayed affordable for so long. But here's why the locals are fighting back so hard. Lancaster has turned its historic downtown into a designated cultural arts district, packed with murals and galleries and festivals, calling itself the Red Rose City, and just to its north, the county's panhandle near Charlotte is booming so fast it's almost unrecognizable. The town of Lancaster is cheap today, wedged between a proud comeback and a growth explosion right next door. Think about that position for a second. To the north, the Charlotte overflow has already turned the top of the county into one of the hottest housing markets in the state, with prices to match. In the town itself, you can still buy in cheap, right as that energy and that arts district revival starts working its way south. There's a real hospital, a growing downtown, and genuine civic pride pushing this place forward. It's the kind of setup where the gap between what a home costs now and what it could be worth later is unusually wide. Get in before the two halves of this county meet in the middle, and you may look like a genius in 10 years. Number 2. Allendale, South Carolina. And number 2 is a place you'd never expect, because it wasn't a mill or a crop that brought it down, it was a highway. When I first drove into Allendale, down in the state's rural southwest corner, I was looking at the cheapest real estate in all of South Carolina, and one of the most fascinating cautionary tales in the country. Here's the wildcard fact. For decades, Allendale thrived on U.S. Highway 301, the main route that carried northern tourists down to Florida, lining its streets with busy motels, restaurants, and gas stations. Then, around 1970, Interstate 95 was completed about 35 miles to the east, and overnight, the traffic vanished. The motels emptied, the restaurants closed. An entire economy built on people passing through simply evaporated when the cars found a faster road. That's the teaser. The town the interstate erased. Today, the median home in Allendale sells for around $76,000, with a property tax bill of just a few $100s a year. Now, this is a community that has faced real, hard, lasting challenges since then. But it's also a proud town with a university campus, a rallying cry of Allendale forward, and people determined to write a better next chapter. For a remote worker or a retiree who wants true rural quiet and almost unbelievable prices, it's a genuine frontier. Just go in with your eyes fully open. And that's the honest heart of it. Allendale is the single most extreme example on this list of a town made cheap by forces that had nothing to do with the people who lived there. Nobody in Allendale voted to move the interstate. They simply woke up one day to find the traffic and the livelihoods gone. It's a sobering lesson in how a single decision on a map can reshape a town's fortunes for 50 years. But it's also a place with cheap land, a slower and kinder pace, and folks working genuinely hard to turn the corner. If you buy here, you're not just buying a bargain, you're joining a comeback that's still being written. If you've made it this far, you clearly want the real story, not the hype. So do yourself a favor and hit that like button, then let's get to number 1. Number 1. Great Falls, South Carolina. And honestly, this is the one I'd keep my eye on above all the rest. When I first drove into Great Falls, on the banks of the Catawba River, I walked past the hollowed-out shells of the mills that once were this town's entire heartbeat. Here's the wildcard fact. Great Falls was a booming textile town, its life organized around the J.P. Stevens Mills, until those mills shut their doors, and as one longtime resident put it, the town simply went dead. The jobs left, the buildings crumbled, and the population drained away, leaving behind homes that now sell for a median of around $117,000, with rents under $900 a month. That's the teaser I opened with. The mill town that went dead when the jobs left. But here's why it's number one, and why the story doesn't end there. Great Falls is named for a stretch of the Catawba River that was, for a century, largely dried up and diverted for hydroelectric power. And now, after years of work, water is being returned to that riverbed, opening up genuine whitewater and flatwater recreation right where the town sits. Great Falls is betting its entire second act on that river, on paddlers, anglers, and outdoor tourists rediscovering a stretch of water that was hidden for generations. It's a town that lost everything, and is quietly wagering its comeback on the one thing it always had. That is why Great Falls is number one. Not because it's the cheapest, Allendale wins that title outright, but because Great Falls is the clearest picture of this entire video. A town made cheap by an industry that vanished, sitting on a real, tangible reason it might not stay cheap much longer. It's less than an hour from Rock Hill, Lancaster, and the whole Charlotte growth machine, and it's got a river coming back to life in its front yard. Buy a house here for the price of a nice truck, and you're not just getting a cheap home, you're placing a bet on a comeback. And out of all 9, it's the one whose next chapter I'd most want to own a piece of. Every town on this list tells the same honest truth. These places aren't cheap because something is wrong with the people who live there. They're proud, rooted, and often fiercely loyal to their hometowns. They're cheap because of economics, a mill that moved overseas, a crop that collapsed, an interstate built in the wrong place, a plant that closed. The forces that hollowed out small-town America left behind real homes, in real communities, at prices the rest of the country forgot. And that's exactly where the opportunity hides. Some of these towns will keep struggling, and you should go in clear-eyed about the trade-offs: fewer jobs, longer drives, patience required. But others are sitting right in the path of growth or on the edge of a genuine comeback. And the people who see it early are the ones who win. Now, a fair and serious word of caution. Cheap is never the whole story, so before you ever buy, you visit in person, you talk to locals, you check the job market and the schools and the drive times for yourself. But the headline is real. In the right South Carolina town, the deal of a lifetime is just sitting there, waiting for someone to understand why. So if this video showed you a side of South Carolina you'd never considered, subscribe and hit that bell so you don't miss the next one. Drop a comment telling me which of these 9 surprised you the most. I read every single one. And if this video hits 15,000 likes, I'll do a part 2 with 9 more towns where the price tells a story. I'll see you in the next.